Well, hello everyone, and thank you so much for joining us for our very first event for Create Virginia 2022. If this is your first event for Create Virginia ever, welcome. We are so happy to have you here with us. Create Virginia is an annual conference that happens here in Lynchburg, Virginia, that helps artists and creatives with business skills. It is a production of the Small Business Development Center for the Lynchburg region, and it is now in its 7th year. So welcome. My name is Stephanie Keener. I'm the Executive Director for the Virginia Small Business Development Center that serves the Lynchburg region. We are part of a network of 29 SBDCs across the Commonwealth, and part of a network of hundreds of SBDCs across the United States. SBDCs are a cooperative agreement of the United States Small Business Administration, George Mason University, and premier organizations across Virginia. Create Virginia, we have lots of folks. Today's event is a live stream, but it also has folks coming into the room who are here live with us. So it is a hybrid event. This is the first time we've done it. So we are this way. So, there may be sounds and things happening behind us. We're just going to roll with it. It's going to be great. So Create Virginia was started about 7 years ago. It was a production of the SBDC, the Academy Center for the Arts in downtown Lynchburg, Virginia, and the Lynchburg Office of Economic Development and Tourism. It started because the Academy asked us, the SBDC, to do a few programs for their artists, for artists who were in our region. And we came up with 3 events, 3 sessions. And from those 3 sessions, we found that we had basically standing room only at those events. And so we thought, hey, there's something going on here. Artists are asking us for more information about how to do the business of the arts better. So that is how Create Virginia was born. It started as Create Lynchburg, and we now serve the whole Commonwealth with the program. So welcome. Thank you for being here today. Today's first topic is podcasting in deep waters. And our presenters today are Lamont Wayne, who is a freelance animator and Amazon live streamer, and Ray Sidney-Smith, who is the president of W3 Consulting and has too many podcasts to list. So we also want to say thank you today to our location host, who is Moore & Giles Leather. Moore & Giles was founded in 1933 here in Lynchburg. They are dedicated to designing and developing the most innovative and luxurious natural leathers for the high-end hospitality, aviation, automotive, and residential interior design industries. They also craft a collection of luxury leather bags, accessories, and home goods as an additional avenue to showcase the inherent beauty and timeless appeal of natural leathers. Thank you so much, Moore & Giles, for hosting us, and I am going to turn it over to our presenters today. Lamont and Ray.
Thanks, Stephanie. Well, welcome, Create Virginia. Thank you to the SBDC for having me here this morning. And just a couple of housekeeping items. I'm here with you all live now, so it is best to ask your questions today, now, right this moment, while you have me in person via the stream. The agenda for this morning is going to be fairly simple. I have about 20-ish minutes with you, and then Lamont will have about 20-ish minutes with you. That gives us enough time for Q&A about all of the topics related to podcasting and live streaming. If you all out there in the virtual need me to speak up louder, I can as well. I can raise my voice to decibel levels that will probably hurt your ears. So just let me know if you can hear me, and we can go from there. Either way, the agenda is going to be pretty simple. I'm going to talk about why I talk about the small business case for podcasting, why podcasting as a small business, as a business owner, as a creative, why do you want to podcast? and kind of talking about my own experience with it, and then hopefully relating that to your all kind of lived experiences, so you have something to kind of think through in that sense. We'll talk about podcast marketing strategy, like how and why you would want to position yourself in different parts of the podcast marketing strategy. We'll talk about what syndication, distribution, and promotion are, which is really marketing the podcast itself, how to get people to know about the podcast. And so for those of you who heard Stephanie's very brief intro of me, just by way of introduction, I'm Sidney-Smith. I'm the CEO of a small digital marketing consulting firm. We actually teach digital marketing to small businesses. We do that primarily through economic development agencies like the SBDC, Chambers of Commerce, economic development agencies, and otherwise. I have a whole bunch of other parts of the business. We have a web services avenue arm to the business, the domain registration and WordPress hosting, all kinds of fun stuff. But I also happen to be the Google Small Business Advisor for productivity. So I help the Google Small Business team out of Mountain View really teach small businesses how to utilize Google, primarily Google Workspace, the business line of productivity products in their businesses. And I'm a super geek, so I love everything technology. And so I love Evernote, which is a note-taking application that can do so many different things. And I just became an Evernote certified expert. Inculcated in the Evernote world ever since, but that's just a little bit of fun hobby for me. Either way, I want to just start us off with the question, are you comfortable? It's a really interesting question, right? Are you comfortable, like right now? What does that mean to you? Are you comfortable in your chair? And if you are comfortable in your chair, is this the same comfort level you would have if you were sitting in your living room, at your dining room table, or cozied up in your bed? Think about it. Right? It's not the same. How about internally? How comfortable are you internally right now with your business, with your life, with your family, relationships, right? When we think about the concept of are you comfortable, I like to bring up this question because in so many ways, that's the level of lack of information you have about the people out there in the world, right? Our interior lives are very different than our exterior perspectives. Right? I can see you all seated here live. Those of you who are out there virtually, I'm sure you're comfortable in some sense, right? You wouldn't be in present discomfort, but everybody has a felt need or want, and it's whether or not they're willing to express it or not. And this is one of the first fundamentals of podcasting. When we think about the small business case for podcasting, we have to remember that podcasting is an intimate medium. Most people listen to podcasts in their ears. They listen to them solo. And therefore, they will listen to things that they would not listen to with others. So when I teach about social networks and social media marketing, I always say, would I wear the t-shirt, right? Whatever you're posting online, you want everybody to engage in that content as though everybody else is going to see that content. Completely and fundamentally different when it comes to podcasting. Because if you're into like macho men crocheting that are left-handed, well, who cares? Because it's in your personal phone and you're capable of absorbing that information without anybody else judging you or shaming you about that content that you're consuming. So that means there's a lot more opportunity in podcasting than there is in any other medium because of that intimacy. At the present moment, we know there's a couple of really important key data points that come out of Edison Research. They do a big podcasting report every year. We're presently at about 2.4 million podcasts out there in the market. So this is basically a 100% increase over the last time I took these statistics right before the pandemic. So we've had just a boatload of new podcasts come onto the market. But don't fear about the number of podcasts that are out there, because I would imagine that many of these have 10 or 5 episodes or less, and they're probably going to fade over time. Podcasting's not easy. And that's the one thing you should understand, is that I never sugarcoat podcasting. It's a difficult practice. It takes consistency, and it takes process. So if you want to get into podcasting, it's not for the faint of heart, right? Next up is that there's 66 million episodes out there. I bring up this point because the episodes and the number of episodes that are out there means that just like anything else, we want to know what topics we can search for, whether that be in a podcast directory or via Google, to be able to find the information we need, right? 66 million, there are billions of web pages on the internet, right? And what we really want to be able to do is to find an audio episode about every topic that we could imagine in life in an audio format. So that there are only 66 million to me shows the just absolute opportunity for podcasting in this space. And next is my favorite statistic, which is back when I started podcasting in 2011, I didn't know anyone who knew that I podcasted. Nobody knew what podcasting was. And today, more than half of Americans know what a podcast is. Actually, the number is much higher than that. But 62% of Americans say they've listened to a podcast. Okay, back in 2014, when I published my first book, when I asked somebody, have you read a blog? They couldn't define a blog, better yet tell you whether they've read a blog. So the fact that we're in 2022 and more than half of Americans have said, yeah, I've listened to a podcast before, is just a remarkable statistic. So this takes us to this little piece up here. This is really my takeaway. I'm going to repeat this right before I close out, so I'm going to not bury the lead. This is a comment that I received for a community that I run. So I'm a personal productivity geek. I love all things time management, and I have lots of podcasts about that topic. Actually, in 2011, I started my first podcast called ProdPod. It now has over 5 million downloads, or listens technically. And so I've been listened far and wide on this very little podcast that I had no interest in anyone really listening to other than myself. So I started this as a passion project, but this person basically said, I've been listening, my name spelled wrong, right? To another podcast, the GTD VSG podcast, the Virtual Study Group, and they're just lauding me for whatever I talk about on that podcast. The reason I bring this up is that for all of the podcasts that I've done in the world, there's hundreds of hours of audio of me online. More people find me through other podcasts that I've been on than my own podcasts. This is my point to you, which is that if you want to do podcasting, go be on a podcast. And that's going to teach you a lot more about podcasting than doing and rolling your own, okay? So get out there and be on a podcast. And really, the reality is that the more you promote that, including if you launch a podcast, then you want to promote that you're on somebody else's podcast, that's going to be also beneficial to you. So remember, the first step in podcasting is go be a guest on somebody else's podcast. Right? Learn on someone else's dime, right? That's what they tell most employees who want to start a side hustle or start a business. Go learn on somebody else's dime. The same thing with podcasting. Go out there and be a guest and do that. I will repeat myself, but this is a really good and key point to all of that. That leads us to the podcast marketing strategy. In essence, I like the idea of choosing a niche. So what is a niche and how do you choose one? So let's start off. What's a podcast niche?
True crime.
True crime, great. That's a category, right? And so what do we know about true crime podcasts?
They're very popular.
They're very popular, right? And they fit a whole category of podcasts, right? They encompass many podcasts. When we can say that about a niche, then it's too broad. And my point is that when we have a category, say in Apple Podcasts, there's about 30 some odd categories. If we can see that category, then it's way too broad, right? So I always try to take two different angles on this. What is it that you are absolutely passionate about? And what's the location or the region of the podcast? Because I know that some of you will think, well, I want to serve everyone in the country, in the world, potentially, who can listen to my podcast. But the reality is that you probably have a business that is localized, where you want to be able to have people come to your business and buy from your business in a local capacity. And so you probably want to drive retail traffic or traffic to your website that's still a localized business. If you're an insurance agent, for example, why do I care about your insurance podcast, right? Like, insurance is the most boring. I used to be an insurance agent, so I know it's the most boring topic in the world, right? But if I go, you know what? I want to do a podcast about all of the craziest claims I've ever seen in the Lynchburg region. Would you listen to that? Right? Like, no one can turn their head away from a car accident, right? Better yet, the craziest claims, right? I've seen a house float away, literally, along the bank of a river, right? And that's a crazy claim, right? If I do that and I tell it in a story format, it's going to be interesting. Always choose a niche and then niche down. Choose a category and then think, where's the location that the podcast is going to be placed, right? We all want a scene. And then we also want to know what that other thing is. What are you passionate about? Because if you're going to do a podcast, it takes you spending lots of time and energy doing that, and you want to be able to talk about this topic all the time, right? I do lots of time management podcasts because I love time management. You can ask me any question about it, and I will go on for hours and hours about the topic, right? I'm passionate about it, but I also know that I need to be able to couch it within those terms. All right, next up is you have to have some kind of content marketing hub. And a podcast really is a content marketing hub in a lot of ways. You can choose any number of different types of hubs. Podcasting can be one piece of it. My very, very brief comments on this are you need to be able to have a place where you place content on the internet that you own. Ultimately, podcasting is an SEO play. And I know that this seems a bit strange to most people, but when we think about podcasting, podcasting is about being able to have Google and wherever else send you traffic that ultimately leads to new business. And if you're not capable of understanding that piece, then you need to do a little bit of research on SEO, right? Do a little bit of research on search engine marketing, and you'll get a better understanding of it. But the very, very crux of it is that content marketing is the perspective that the more content you produce on the internet, the more Google and the other search engines, Google dominates in search, but there are other search engines out there, those search engines will then drive traffic to your website. And the more traffic you have to your website, if you have a sales strategy in place on the website, you will then be able to have more business. Now, so you need to create some kind of content marketing hub. The podcast is nothing more than a blog with audio attached to it. Okay, so think about it from that perspective. A podcast is a blog with audio attached to it. When you have that in place, that means the blog post is more important for SEO than the attached MP3 file. Okay? And that's what I'm talking about when we're talking about the content marketing hub. So whether you have a blog, a podcast, a video channel, whatever it is, it needs to live on your website, and you have to have that feed associated with it, that podcasting feed associated with it. That's an RSS feed. It has to be able to have a media enclosure. If you don't know what I'm talking about, that's fine. Talk to your web developer, and you'll figure that piece out, or email me afterward and I can walk you through it. Either way, you're going to be able to create your content marketing hub, and you'll want to create a content calendar. So all of you, no matter what you're doing in your businesses, should have a content calendar. Meaning that whether you're going to put out a podcast, whether you're going to put out a blog, you're going to do a video channel or Instagram Live or Amazon Live, you have to have a calendar. You need to know what you're doing and when. Easiest way to do that is if you're a going concern for more than 3 years, look at QuickBooks, look at your accounting software, and see where your peaks and valleys are throughout the year. Okay, it's usually very, very good to look at that data and to be able to determine, you know what, in June, we have this spike in sales for this particular product or service, and so we're going to do all of our marketing kind of around that topic during that time frame. Think about your sales cycle, not just the peak, right? So if your sales cycle is 9 weeks, 18 weeks, whatever it is, you need to be talking about that topic 18 weeks before your peak so that you're capable of walking clients through the process and getting to the peak in June. You want to do that for the entire 365 days of the year or 366 on a leap year. You want to think about what's happening every year. The years repeat. I don't know if you know that, but if you just literally decide what the themes are throughout the year, you can do that. Now again, we could do this seasonally. For most of you, you're really running on a 5 to 7 week cycle, and we want a story arc. So we want to think about what's happening in our business in terms of every 5 to 7 weeks. What do we want to talk about that's a brand message? And by doing that, we're really capable of then narrating to our audience a consistent message. So again, going back to insurance, if I wanted to talk about riparian rights, I talked about the house floating away, that's water rights, and thinking about what kind of water damage could happen to a house. Well, I can do a whole narrative, 5 to 7 weeks of content just on that. I maybe go out there to the house, interview the past owners, talk to the claims department, and talk to the surveyor, talk to the folks who demolished the house eventually. And all of that becomes 5 to 7 weeks worth of content. Everything in my business is now enveloped. All of my business's marketing is enveloped by that narrative for that 5 to 7 weeks. And then the next 5 to 7 weeks is going to be something different, and so on and so forth. Does that make sense? Right? We want to have like anchors in our year where we're not constantly fluttering around with different topics. So Twitter and Facebook and Instagram and everything else is kind of included in all of that, and the podcast is that kind of that hub to that content. Next up is SEO and social SEO. I'm going to kind of couch that because we don't have time for it. But if you have any questions about SEO and how this works, as I said, blog post, plus media file equals podcast. So as long as you can kind of understand that, you're going to be good there. Let's just touch on growing your show. One is community is really, really important here when it comes to podcasting. My next book is going to be all about this concept of community and the foundation of business. And what we understand about businesses is that businesses that include a community survive. Those that don't struggle. And what I mean by community is that they have three fundamental aspects of it. They give, they take, and they create a sense of belonging. Community is all around you. Right now, we're in community. You're together with a group of people, giving, receiving, and feeling a sense of belonging and connectedness with one another. This is the same thing in your family units. This is the same thing in church. This is the same thing in your business, book club, you name it. All of it is some type of dynamic grouping, and dynamic grouping creates this sense of community. When we create that sense of community in podcasting, it's what we call a parasocial relationship. So a parasocial relationship is when I speak to you all, and you all get to know me, but I don't really know you. Except that you now feel like you have a relationship with me, right? So I've got thousands of people who listen to my podcasts, and I know very few of them, but they feel like they know me, right? And I walk around town and people will be, is that you, Ray? I know your voice, right? And it's because they recognize my voice. I clearly have a unique voice to them, and they pick that out, right? And it's happened to me. I'm just walking down, through Manhattan, and someone's like, I heard you speaking. Are you that guy? And it's like creepy first. You get used to it after a while. But the reality is that they feel like they know you, and you then get to know them, right? You can only get to know them so much, but that parasocial relationship is a part of the start of community building. Now, there are all kinds of other ways in which you can grow community. You can create online platforms that bring them together in deeper community and all kinds of things. But just remember that the community is so important to podcasting. Guesting is really important. I've already talked about that. But really, you should be consistently being a guest on other podcasts. There should be never a time when you're not working on another interview to be on in terms of podcasting. It's the best way for you to grow a podcast is to be on other people's podcasts that align well with your audience, right? Because if you have lots of other people who are podcasting and little bits of their audience could also be your audience, then why not be on those podcasts? And one of the most important pieces of that is that if you're on someone else's podcast, it's different than my own, right? So if I'm on my podcast and I say, hi, everybody, and then spend 5 minutes explaining who I am and why you should be listening to my podcast, it's kind of weird and, it's like self-serving. But when you go on somebody else's podcast, they're immediately like, no, you need to tell us why you're the authority in this subject. They want to know your story. And then you go on the next one, and they do the same thing, and they do the next, and the next, right? So every time you go to another podcast, you basically get to share that with your own audience, but you're basically selling yourself through their podcast because that podcast host has to interview you, and therefore has to get why you're important to their audience. But in essence, you're really telling your own audience the same thing. So it's kind of a nice little package there. All right. Of course, inviting appropriate guests is also important to your own podcast. You want guests that align well with yours. Like if you're doing a pastry podcast, you don't bring in a bunch of, beef producers, right? Like it wouldn't make much sense unless maybe you're doing like meat pies. But you want to really have the right alignment in terms of guests. And then of course, consistency is key. I've broken every one of my own rules here today. Consistency, though, is so important. So do as I say, not as I do. But really, be consistent. I stopped with ProdPod, my first podcast, being consistent with it just because it had no real value to my business. I was just doing it for fun. And so I became inconsistent with it. I would not do that if I were to look back on that. I hit 118 episodes, and today it gets maybe 2,000 to 4,000 downloads a day. And I just let it do its thing, right? It's crazy that many people listen to this podcast that I do nothing for, but they're little individual episodes. I'm sure people listen to them over and over again, so there's a little bit of whatever. But for you, consistency is really important. People build podcasts into their regular daily lives, into their routines. And if you break that routine, then they're likely to forget who you are and go on and fill that gap in their day with somebody else who is going to be consistent. Okay, so be mindful of the fact that consistency is key for you. How much time do we have? I'm going to go another
30.
Okay, great. I'm going to run through this really quickly, and then I'll hand it over to you, Lamont.
Yeah.
Okay, so marketing your podcast is really an entire 2 days by itself. But I'm going to try and run through this so you have an understanding of where things start. Things start in syndication. Syndication is purely the idea of placing your podcast feed into the podcast directories. There are instructions online for all of those things. Many of your podcast hosts will do this automatically. And so just make sure that you're in the directories. That's baseline. That's literally a heartbeat, right? It is nothing more than the heartbeat of the podcast. But this is where podcast apps receive the new podcast episodes and therefore deliver new episodes to people who are pretty savvy about podcasting in the first place. So that's kind of your base level audience. We don't want to stop there though as business owners. We really want to be able to take it beyond that. And this is where distribution comes from. Distribution for me is really about access and discovery. And that means we want to be able to do things that non-techie folks are able to access. Most podcasters don't do this, and I have no idea why not. But a simple email list that has an RSS feed capability built into it is like the number one way in which I see podcasts grow. That is to say, if I go to a podcast website and they give me an email address to sign up, every time a new podcast episode comes out, it sends me an email and says, hey, Ray, listen to this new episode. Most people, my grandmother included, could do that, right? She has an email address. She can go into the site, plug in her email address, and now she gets an email anytime a new podcast episode comes out, right? Make it super simple for the non-techie. They shouldn't have to know what a podcast app is or how an RSS feed works. Like, don't make people have to do those backflips to be able to figure out the technology. Bring the content to them. Make sure that you're converting content to different formats. So some of you may be purists and think a podcast can only be one of the 3 audio types built into the RSS specification, which is video, audio, or PDF. But that's not true. Really, the reality is that Google loves all of the content, all the types of content. So you can do a video podcast, and Lamont's going to be talking about how he does video in a live stream format, which you can also turn into a podcast. But don't limit yourself in terms of the types of media. We're gonna skip that. All right. Next up is promotion. Promotion is the idea of taking not just each episode and going out there and promoting on the episode level, but promoting on the show level is really important as well, right? So every time you put out an episode, you go ahead and put it out on Twitter, put it on your Facebook page, those kinds of things. That's really episodic type promotional activity. But on the show level, guesting, again, being guests on podcasts help expose people to your show, but as well, promoting the show via your newsletter and your website, anywhere you get an opportunity to tell people that you have a show is really going to be important as well. You want to give people both of those layers of things in terms of things. All right, on the episode level, we want to basically make sure that we're monitoring also social media for episode topics that may come up. So when someone brings up a topic, you want to be able to engage them in that conversation, and that's going to bring new listeners to the fold as well. I can answer any questions during Q&A about this, but obviously mention episodes during public speaking events and also in podcast interviews. What I mean by that is that if I have an episode where I talk about a specific subject, say I talk about bullet journal in an episode on my podcast, if that comes up in a presentation, then I'm going to say, oh, you know what? Go check out episode 167 of Productivity Cast, where I talk about bullet journaling, and you'll get a lot of value out of that particular episode. If someone gets high value out of one episode from me, then they're going to potentially follow the whole podcast and then get inculcated in the podcast, get kind of invested in the podcast in that sense. All right, so with that, I'm going to hold questions. I'm going to hand this over to Lamont and take it away.
All right. Thanks, sir. Okay, well, first off, I would say thank you, everybody, for coming today. I've been to all of these. Like every year that Create Virginia has existed, I've attended. And being invited to present to everybody, it's just been, it's a total honor. Thank you for there we go. All right, but I think it's smart from Create Virginia to pair me with Ray. because I mean, Ray's obviously been doing this for a long time. I've just started live streaming, and I've done it for maybe about a year, right? So I just wanted to share with you guys some things that, like 5 things that I've noticed that will help you get, as you're starting, your podcast or your live stream. But I mean, who am I anyway to even say anything to you? But I guess you could. I used to say that I'm a freelance animator, but I think today I'm more of a content creator. I create animated videos for businesses and nonprofits and stuff like that. I've done explainer videos, educational videos, and that sort of thing. And just like Ray was saying, how you become a guest on a podcast and you get to talk about yourself. I guess I'm talking about myself a little bit. In 2010, Hollywood Shorts named me one of their 10 filmmakers to watch. I directed a motion comic for the CDC that won the HHS Innovates Award from the Obama administration. I just recently worked on animation for a documentary that won Best in Film at the International Black Film Festival. And I worked on a music video. I worked on Gunna's music video. I did animation for the three-headed snake video that he did. But what am I doing on Amazon? I've got my merch on, so you guys can see my merch. And I'm going to do a t-shirt live stream on Amazon as well. But just 5 things that I've discovered as I went along. And the thing that everybody wants to know right off the bat, how do you make money live streaming, right? And there's a lot of different ways that you can monetize your live streams, okay? The one that's the most common, I think, is affiliate links. And that's where, you work with a company or a website, and they provide you with links that are like connected to like your account. And every time someone clicks on that link and makes a purchase, then you make a commission every time someone buys something from you. You can do that. There are ads. Everybody knows about internet ads. We've had ads since, the 90s. So, every time somebody clicks on an ad, you would get a commission off when that happens. There are partnerships. And I've been lucky enough to get a few partnerships where you work directly with a brand or a company or some sort of entity where they will pay you and they would send products or provide you with discount links or something like that. And then you would take that and you would share that in your live stream, okay? The donations. I don't know if you guys are familiar with, the live streamers are on Facebook. Facebook, they have a system called Stars. Twitch has a system called Bits, where people who are watching you and they can just give you money. And they do that. They'll give you money. And then there's merch. You can have merch, very easy to get on a website. I just got on the Amazon merch. But there's sites like Redbubble and stuff like that where you can create, T-shirts and stuff like that where you can, share and stuff for your audience. And then sponsorships where you can work with a brand and you would brand out your live stream with graphics, it's totally for them, and you can kind of be like their personality where, you talk about, their product and that sort of thing. But that's just a couple of them. And there's like things like Patreon where people can subscribe to you and pay you a monthly fee for different content and stuff like that. Relevance. Ray was talking about that a little bit. And there is going to be a little overlap. But what the main thing you want to think about is why should people listen to you in the first place? What are you saying to them that gives them some sort of value? And what sets you apart from any other live streamers? Like Ray was talking about, you want to niche down and then you want to niche some more. You want to do that with live streaming as well. Community. Ray was talking about this. This is key with live streaming because your live stream remember back in the day, they used to say on the commercials, as a part of this complete balanced breakfast. Live streams are a part of your overall social media strategy, okay? It's the hangout. Okay, like Ray was saying earlier about how people they get to know you. Well, with live streams, there's going to be a chat. Okay, there's going to be people who are typing in the chat and they're talking to you, so they're hanging out with you, and you're going to get to know them. You know, so interact with those people, and you get to build the community. And the people you'll find that people want to hang out. They want to hang out with you. As far as your followers, unfortunately or fortunately, however you want to look at it, this is how brands determine how they're going to work with you. So followers is something that you want to pay attention to. But don't think that having a small following don't think that your following doesn't have value. Because being a micro influencer is a thing, okay? And what I mean by micro influencer is someone who has between 1,000 to 100,000 followers on their social media, okay? These days, I keep getting asked, do you have around 10,000 followers on TikTok? Do I have 10,000 followers on Instagram? Right, so that's kind of like the benchmark that they're looking for. And being a micro influencer has power because you've built a community that is the community is niched down. So you and your art. I mean, that's what your that's what your niche is. So your closing average is higher, and the people are more willing to listen to what you have to say. Now, engagement. You got to chat. So talk to your chat. I mean, you're going to see. I mean, all you're going to see are their usernames, right? But those usernames will start to pop up over and over again, and you're going to start to get to know them, right? And what you want to do is, I created a hub. I mean, I use Discord, and I route everybody over to my Discord, and that's where everybody hangs out and talks. But I mean, you're going to build a core audience of folks that are going to talk to you and get to know you. And look, you're going to have lurkers. I mean, I'm sure we're going to have people, if there is a chat. I don't know if we even have a chat. We do. Okay, there are people who are watching me right now who really don't feel like they want to say anything in the chat, but that's fine. And you're going to get that too. You're going to have people who are going to come to your live stream over and over and over again. They feel like they have a connection with you, but they just don't feel like that they want to say anything. But that's fine. Just make sure that you create a comfortable atmosphere when you live stream and make them feel welcome. Okay, and then introverts. Okay, because I know some of you might be looking at me like, well, that's easy for you. All this stuff is easy for you to say, Lamont, because look, I'm an introvert. I really don't like talking to people. It's kind of, tough. You got to have nerves of steel to get on Amazon and be talking to people. No, I mean, I'm an introvert. I mean, I'm spending a lot of energy right now talking to y'all. Really, I'm probably have to take a nap after I go home. But I mean, some of the best live streamers you'll ever meet are introverts because they're not talking to people. I mean, they're in a room by themselves and they're just talking to a camera. And you'll find that this is a really nice way to, express yourself, with others and not have all the anxiety associated with being a public speaker. And goals. All right. Don't just turn the camera on and just, I'm going to just live stream today. Okay. Have goals in mind, right? Like someone just starting out. Hey, are you just live streaming on Saturday? Are you just doing your podcast on Saturday and you want to expand it? Maybe your goal is to do it every day, right? Are you trying to get affiliate on Twitch, right? I mean, figure out some nice achievable goals for yourself, write them down, and aim towards them, right? But I'll give you a warning. I mean, when you start looking at those metrics, how many people are watching you and when, what time of day are you live streaming? don't let that stuff consume you, because you can obsess over it, right? So don't fall into that. Just focus on, are you happy with what you're doing? Is the live streaming, are you getting something personal out of it? Some kind of personal satisfaction over what you're doing. But that's it. Really quick. Those are my links there. Hey, scan that and follow me, everybody. All right, but I guess if anybody had any questions for me and Ray, I guess we could take those.
Do we want to start with a question from our live studio audience? Anybody?
I had a question. When you're talking about like the micro influencer piece, and we were looking at the numbers, so one of my questions was, is that kind of like per platform or across all of your platforms when they're looking at like your follower counts?
Most brands really want to look at one platform. They'll ask you specifically, like, how many followers do you have on TikTok? How many on Instagram? You can try to present like your whole social media and show them, what you've got going on. But yeah, aim for around like 10,000 on Instagram, and then brands they'll want to talk to you.
I would couch that more in the perspective of what's your goal with regard to that brand partnership, or with regard to them being able to sponsor you in some way, shape, or form. So, for example, if you go to a local company that doesn't have the gravitas that a larger brand has, they may be willing to pay you a heck of a lot more money for a heck of a lot less work, with a smaller following, right? And they may aggregate that following across many different accounts. So what Lamont's saying is absolutely true. If Nike comes a knocking, right? They're a DTC brand, right? Direct to consumer brand. They're going to want you to have millions of followers on explicitly TikTok, because they want to be able to create content with you that's going to get in front of that audience and know that campaign is going to be successful. But like your local Dairy Queen, right? The manager might be like, hey, you know what? You can get in front of our local audience, and X, Y, and Z goals will be met. I don't care if you have 1 million followers. I need you to have 500 followers of people who are in the Lynchburg region. Right? That's a different calculus. So just make sure that you know what your goals are with regard to where you're trying to get to, and then go from there. I just always recommend to everyone to think through what the local bloggers, local podcasters, and local video channel producers, and then of course the local micro influencers. In that market, it's a completely different kind of set of options to think through when you talk about monetizing in that sense. Right? Yeah, of course.
Can I just say something really quickly? One of the things that I've learned working with a podcast that I work with is that even in a big intellectual property, something that's like big in pop culture, within that group, there are still small niches of people to work with, right? There are enamel pin makers and sock knitters and just all kinds of things that are out there, that it's not just about going to your main street, restaurant and saying, hey, I have a small local following. I'd love to, review your restaurant on my stream. It's also, there are always, like Ray said, that niche within the niche where you can start building that. Nika, did you have a question?
Yeah, you had mentioned, Ray, that the blog post is more important than the MP3. For SEO purposes, would that be a transcription of the actual podcast, or should you write something unique?
Great question. So for those of you in the live stream who may not have heard the question, basically when we talk about the blog post, is the blog post basically just a transcript of the episode, or is it something different? And the answer is something different. Okay, so when you take a raw transcript of an audio episode, what you're doing is you're duplicating the efforts of Apple and Google and the other larger search engines that are out there. And it's kind of funny because it's not just traditional search engines, Amazon with their AMP product, and a lot of others who are in the audio space today, they are already transcribing your audio. Google transcribes the audio of every podcast episode that comes into the feed. You don't see it. They don't give it to you, but they have transcribed it. So you don't need to give Google that data. They already have it. what you need to remember is that the podcast audio is partially for Google. You can make an argument to me about that, but it's predominantly for human. When I put my earbuds in, I'm a Google person, so my Pixel Buds Pro, I'm going to pop those puppies in. Nothing against any of you AirPods Pro folks out there. I don't want to get any hate mail. But you pop in your earbuds and you start listening to that podcast. It's all about me, the human, and the intimacy you're creating in that relationship in the audio, right? The blog is dual purpose. That text is for me, the human, to be able to have a call to action to come to, right? You're a business owner. You want to be able to bring people to your blog to bring them closer to you and your brand, right? If they're listening in the Apple Podcast app or the Google Podcast app or Stitcher or Podcast Addict or Overcast, they don't have a relationship with you. They have a relationship with the podcast app or the platform. You want to be able to create a relationship that's one-to-one now. And you want to bring them closer to you. That's why you have the website. That's why you have the blog. So what content are you putting there to entice them to come over and to check you out and what you have to say about that? So it's making sure you have something to offer to them, right? Some kind of call to action that leads to something that they can pursue a deeper relationship with you. That could be, I have a comment section on every episode. Come ask a question of me. It could be that I have a downloadable asset. Everyone who comes to my website, if you give up something very reasonable, like an email address or a phone number, I can give you this thing that will be more useful to you, and so on and so forth. So the blog post, I usually like to think of it this way. You're going to outline every episode, right? Headings, what are the questions, what are the topics you're going to cover, and then write 1 or 2 sentences about what you're going to talk about. Voila, you now have all of that. Add in any links to external pieces or internal pieces that you discuss, put those in, and now you have your show notes, you have an effective blog post, and you have something that's going to go out there. You're already going to write a post for social media and for Twitter and everywhere else. So you're just basically repurposing all of that content into one place. And then if you want to place a transcript, sure, take a PDF, toss that into the blog post as well and upload it. Great. I'm a PDF downloader. I love a podcast that has a transcript because I love to be able to read while I'm listening. Fine. But that's not going to benefit you in terms of Google and SEO. Because I'm giving you some thought there.
This one is from Hope G online, and it says, what's the best platform to use for starting your live stream?
It depends on your goals. Who is your audience? There's different platforms beyond. There's Facebook, there's Twitch. You can live stream on TikTok. You go where your audience is, and that's the best place to be.
Like literally every platform, as Lamont noted. YouTube has YouTube Live.
Yep, YouTube.
Instagram has Instagram Live. Facebook Live. Twitter Live. Twitter has Spaces. So if you don't like to be on camera, you could just go live in audio only. So you have a lot of options there. There are also tools that allow you to be able to live stream across multiple platforms. So I do a weekly live stream, and I go live on YouTube, Facebook, and Twitter all simultaneously. And that actually gets turned into another podcast, which is why I have so many podcasts. But the idea is that I'm not caring so much. Like, I don't really spend much time on Facebook, right? Our company doesn't spend that much time on Facebook, but I stream it there because it's available to me. And so, the few people who watch it there can now do that and consume it there. But I'm going live on YouTube Live because that's where my primary audience is. That's where I want to be able to be available to my folks. Again, Google Small Business Advisor. So I want to make sure that I'm on the Google properties and making sure Google stays happy with me. And so I'm doing what I need to do in that space. So just, again, go back to Lamont's point.
Where's your audience?
Yeah, where's your audience? What are your goals as it relates to that live stream? You want to be as close to both the content platform you want to be seen on with your audience and those monetization opportunities. Something that I wanted to note from earlier is that everything Lamont said about live stream monetization options are all podcast options as well, including making a premium offering, basically having a podcast that people pay to have access to. I tend not to talk about it because as a business, you're trying to promote your business through the podcast, so you would make it free. But some businesses can create exclusive content and charge for that.
Yeah.
So just be mindful of where you're going with that. And but I think if you're going to do Amazon and you're trying to do you're trying to go live and you want to be able to sell Amazon products, obviously Amazon Live is where you want to be because you have that carousel of products and you're going to make commission off of it. Be close to the monetization options that you want.
And there are new platforms that are starting to come out. I read that Shopify is going to be starting a new live stream platform for e-commerce. So, just research what's out there and see what's best for you.
That's great. We have another question from Natalie, and she says, what's the best equipment to use, especially for a video podcast?
The equipment that you have. That is the answer, okay? It's so often that people come to me and they want to know, why they can't do something because they need more equipment than they have. So you're always going to want, at least I am, I always want better equipment. I always want more. I always want to level up. And the reality is that the fact that you're joining this live stream means that you have all the equipment you probably need as long as you have a webcam built into the device. Most of you have a smartphone in your pocket or in your hand or sitting in front of you, which is going to allow you to go live directly from that and also record most video podcasts directly from that as well. There are basically platforms like Riverside.fm that allow you to basically utilize the hardware that you have and to record a pretty high quality video podcast right directly in there. Not the same for live streaming, where I think you actually need less effective hardware, but in the video podcasting space, most smartphones today, if you have bought a smartphone in the past 3 years, you have more than sufficient hardware to be able to do it. The most important thing, I think, is making sure you have a really strong connection to your broadband internet. So that's the biggest thing. Something that I didn't say earlier, and I think Lamont would agree with me, is that while everybody talks about video and the power and effectiveness of video, I bet you that if I just went silent right now in the video feed and all you saw were my lips moving, you'd really understand the power and importance of audio. So, video is great. It does a whole bunch of really amazing stuff, and it's not to say that video isn't the future, but audio is where it's at, because if the video is like grainy during a live stream and whatever else, you can deal with that. But if the audio goes out and you can't understand what I'm saying and I'm a talking head, it's done, right?
Yeah.
Make sure that you have a really strong broadband internet connection and that the audio itself is what you're really getting across and conveying with people. Lamont, did you have any?
Yeah. Well, all that being said, don't let that paralyze you. Like, don't look at your live streaming setup and your gear, and don't look at the mistake that I made. Don't look at your space that you're in and get paralyzed. Because when I first started, on Amazon Live, it was prime time. It was Prime Day. And I got a sponsorship from a drawing tablet company, and I just jumped into it. And I looked at what I was doing, and I looked at what my peers were doing, and it just did not. The level of production that they had was nowhere near with the production that I had, and it stopped me. I was like, wait, I got to stop, and I got to improve my space. I got to get a better camera. I got to do all these different things, which was a big mistake, So don't let that stop you. Just go. Just turn the camera on and go.
We have another question that just came in is, how do you monetize as a brand new podcast?
How do you monetize a brand new podcast? Bad news for good people. You're not. Unless you come out the gate and you have 5,000 downloads per episode, you're really not going to be in a place where brands are going to want to sponsor you, or that even interstitial ads that are placed either pre-roll or mid-roll in the podcast are even going to be effective. Now, there are platforms that will allow you from day one to monetize, but you're going to be making pennies, tens of cents a month, not hundreds of dollars or even thousands of dollars per month that you can otherwise make at that probably 3,000 to 5,000 download per episode mark. And so there are other ways. Think through partnerships, think through grants. There are lots of podcast contests that are out there today that are helping people fund basically the startup process. But in order to do that, I really need to see a strong marketing strategy. I need to see that you have the ability to grow that podcast very, very quickly and get it to scale. And that usually means having a hired producer and making sure that you have a lockdown in terms of your overall brand. So I see this all the time. People come to me and they say, I want to grow a podcast and I want to be able to monetize, pretty quickly. And they don't own the IP on the podcast name. They don't own a website that has effective, infrastructure. And, it's just kind of amateurish. And so I need you to go out there and make sure that you've done the right work, the right stuff. And like, for example, if I look at your podcast, album cover and I put it down to the, postage stamp size and it's not readable, right? How is anybody else in the podcast apps going to see that podcast pop in your particular category, right? These are just the little details that make you stand out that can help you figure out whether or not you're going to be able to monetize or not. So just start thinking through what's your strategy. Can you grow in an effective time frame to a particular size? And again, you're looking for that first stage of probably 5,000 downloads, then 10,000, then you basically escalate to about the 100,000 download per episode mark. But at that point is really where monetization starts. If you really, really want to, though, you can go to anchor.fm and they monetize from day one. Blueberry Podcasting also has a program where you can basically do interstitial ads and they can monetize from day one. But just absolutely want you to be aware that it is going to be pennies that you will make. And you're probably going to piss off your listeners, right? Because, if I start out with a new podcast and, you're still proving yourself to me and you've got ads in it, that's less of my desire to keep listening. Whereas after I've been listening to you for a long time and I know that millions of people are also listening to this podcast together, then I'm willing to put up with ads, right? Or pay to have the ads removed, which is another monetization strategy. But for a new podcast that's proving itself, I see 3 episodes in the can, in the feed, and you've got ads in it, especially ads that don't necessarily jive with the brand because they're being dynamically introduced by a platform. It really turns me off, and I'm sure that it turns off the average podcast listener. So just keep that in mind. Good luck.
Okay.
I think that's everything.
Well,
Awesome.
So we just want to say thanks to everybody who joined us for the first event for Create Virginia. Thank you. I know I'm sliding in behind you guys. We have so many more events coming up. If you look at createvirginia.com, you'll see tonight's keynote with Keisha Rogers on systems thinking for creatives. We also have an event coming up on Friday night, which is about TikTok, if you want to talk a little bit more about some live streaming. And of course, you can always check everything out at sbdclynchburgregion.org for the things that we are doing. So thanks, everybody. Thank you to our live studio audience for being here. And we hope to hear from you soon. Join us again at createvirginia.com.